Obviously, currently, our eyes are focused quite reasonably on NATO's eastern flank, where the threat has been primarily a land-based one. The Russian Black Sea Fleet's role being limited to supporting a precision strike campaign. Over the longer term, though, in a European context, we could see adversaries, peer competitors, using maritime power to challenge some of NATO's strategic lines of communication as a sort of riposte to NATO's and Western use of economic statecraft, for example, in ways that they can't match. The obvious example that comes across here is Russia's development of special purpose submarines to challenge the security of undersea cables, upon which a good deal of the international financial system and the information infrastructure that underpins it depends. So one long-term challenge in a European context is the threat to strategic lines of communication, not just in wartime, but in peacetime. Further afield, we could see the emergence of a real peer competitor to certainly the United States in the Indo-Pacific, in the form of the People's Liberation Army Navy, which increasingly is developing into a force capable of multi-regional deployments and which may well have local regional preponderance. For Western nations and for the US in particular, this will represent a real sea change in terms of the geopolitics of both the Indo-Pacific and the world beyond, because for the first time you will, in a very long time, the United States will be squaring off against the maritime, and its allies will be squaring off against the maritime power, which with the same capacity and capability as the US itself at sea. There's a few threats that I think the war in Ukraine underscores from a maritime perspective. The first, of course, is the important role that maritime assets, including those with fairly limited sort of size and capacity, can play in supporting the Russian air and missile threat to NATO nations' homelands. And we've seen this in full display in Ukraine. Maritime vessels, though by no means the only assets capable of launching precision strike assets, have been a favored launch platform given their size and capacity, amongst other things, and relative mobility. The second threat I would expect we would want to focus on moving forward is a threat not just to sea lines of communication, but strategic lines of communication. So that's information infrastructure, undersea cables, but also things like offshore infrastructure, which may become more and more critical to the generation of energy moving forward, to use one example. This is the sort of infrastructure that can reasonably be challenged in what we might describe as the gray zone, in sort of persistent competition short of warfighting, and challenging it using things like special purpose submarines may well serve as the only riposte that economically relatively incapable actors have to, for example, the use of economic statecraft against them. So that risk of disruption in the longer term is something we probably we would want to anticipate and guard against in the wake of the Ukraine conflict.